We are an on-demand delivery platform, like a DoorDash, and we've noticed that our customer wait time has increased across the US in metropolitan areas. What would you recommend we do to address this issue? Hey there, we're so excited to film another Exponent show with you today. I'm here with Angela to go through a metrics type mock interview. Angela, do you mind briefly introducing yourself for the audience?
Yeah, of course. Hey everyone, my name is Angela. Super happy to be here for the mock interview. And Exponent helped me greatly as I was preparing for my interview and helped me land an opportunity on product strategy and operation at Google. I'm super excited to be here today, and hopefully this mock interview will be helpful for those who are preparing for interviews in the community.
Awesome, thanks, and we're happy to have you. Alrighty, so I have a question for you today. We are an on-demand delivery platform, like a DoorDash, and we've noticed that our customer wait time has increased across the US in metropolitan areas. What would you recommend we do to address this issue?
Yeah, sounds good. So just to clarify, our goal is to identify what has, drove the increase of overall customer wait time, and we wanted to find a solution to address that problem. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Cool. So I think just come to share with you overall how I wanted to approach this problem. So I think, of course, starting off by, asking some clarification questions, just help me to kind of understand, what is the impact or magnitude of this issue. And this will really help us to, identify if there's something serious that we need to address immediately, or that's something we can just monitor. So in real life, this really help us to prioritize and thinking about allocation of resources. And then of course, I wanted to really clarify with you when we say overall customer wait time, what does that really mean? Because that could mean different things. So wanted to really clarify that. And then after that, I think will be important for us to kind of talk about some potential or probable causes that could have led to this issue. And then I will share hypothesis, and then we can evaluate and then identify what the root cause is. And then very lastly, based on that findings, I can share back with recommendations. Does that sound like a good approach to you?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Awesome. So yeah, so before kind of diving into the problem, just kind of for me to get a bit more context in terms of the overall impact and the time frame of this problem, do you mind just kind of share with me a little bit in terms of is this a one-time job, or that something has happened progressively? Which part is of the market is impacted, and how big is the impact? So it's a 2% or 20%. This help us kind of evaluate how serious the problem is.
Yeah, let's say that this is, not really a spike. It's been happening since, say, May, and in areas like SF, New York, and say it's a pretty noticeable change. Let's say, maybe from 40-minute waits to 45, so about, 15-ish%.
Got it. So it sounds like this is not something within normal fluctuation on a regular day, and then sounds like this is a serious problem we wanted to tackle. Are there any other related metrics that we have noticed have moved along with the increase of overall customer wait time?
Yeah, let's say, because of the increased wait time, we're seeing a dip in CSAT scores, like customer satisfaction, and overall the number of orders placed as well.
Got it. Okay, so that's pretty helpful. It sounds like this is something that is not an isolated market, but more kind of generally abroad across many US metropolitan cities. So this could potentially be a broader problem, but I just wanted to kind of dissect into a couple different components. So you kind of mentioned that the overall wait time is the moment when the customer placed their order to the moment they receive the order. So if I just kind of putting myself in the shoes of a customer and thinking about my own DoorDash experience, I think that's kind of have a couple of different parts. So number one, I think is the order confirmation time. So when I place the order to the time the restaurant or merchants confirm the order. So that's kind of the number one, and the order confirmation time. And then after that, I believe it's going to be the preparation time from the restaurants. So the time it takes them to complete the order, have that ready for pickup. And then after that is like the time between the order completion and the carrier of the driver actually arrive at the restaurant to pick up the order. And then very lastly is the delivery time, which is the time from the order being picked up to the time of the order being delivered. So I think I wanted to kind of evaluate each of the components to see like where exactly this problem is happening. And then we can identify if it's on the merchant side or the carrier side that it's contributing to the problem here. Does it sound like a good approach to you, like evaluating each one of the components?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Sounds good. And then kind of before going to the first part, and one thing I just also wanted to ask is like, are we observing the change happening during a particular day of the time of the day, like a lunchtime or dinner time? That will also help us to kind of like scope down in terms of where to focus on.
Let's say it's pretty consistent for both times.
Got it. Okay, so that's consistent and across, lunch and dinner time. So maybe just to start off with the very first one, are we seeing any, in terms of order confirmation time that has increased, meaning like restaurants are taking longer to accept customer orders?
Let's say there's no meaningful change there.
Okay, so let's disregard that one. Sounds like that is not really contributing to the issue here. Moving to the next one, what about any shifts in terms of like preparation time? Are the restaurants taking longer to, prepare the orders?
Let's say there's no significant increase in preparation time either.
Okay, so the merchants or restaurants are just like taking a normal range of time to have the order ready for pickup. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so sounds like that's not also contributing to the issue here. What about the time between order completion to order pickup? Maybe the orders are just completed, but just sitting there waiting for the driver to come in and pick it up. Has that time increased since May?
Yeah, let's say that has increased.
Got it. Okay, so seems like there's something going on the carrier side if the order is ready, just like waiting there for the driver to pick it up. So I noted that on my notes here. I will kind of circle back on this one after evaluating the very last piece, since that is also related to carrier time. So the very last piece is the delivery time. Are we noticing any change or increase in terms of the delivery time? I think there has to be something going on there because we evaluate the first couple components. And are we seeing that also increased?
Yes, let's say we have.
Okay, so that's very helpful. And then just like super quick recap here. So we're basically saying that the increase in time is from the from order completion to being picked up, and also from the actual carrier delivery time. So I think those two sounds like is where the problem is, but I also wanted to kind of dig a bit deeper to see what's actually happening there. So if the problem is more on the carrier side, I can think about a couple of things on top of my head that worth evaluating. Number one is, insufficient carrier supply. Do we have, the hypothesis here is like, do we have enough carriers on the road? If our supply does not really match the demand, that could have led to the overall increased delivery time. Or secondly, it could also be like non-optimal navigation or like routing for our drivers. So the hypothesis there is like, there might be some change in terms of how we dispatch our drivers, or any change in the in-app map or navigation experience that could have negative experience or negative results on the carrier delivery time. Or like the third part, I think we also want to consider, this is more kind of external factor that could also be like traffic. So I think you mentioned that this has increased since like May. I think like that's when like many cities start to reopen and people are starting to return to work. So the traffic could have now been an issue in those metropolitan, especially in downtown areas. So that's kind of like just like on top of my head, thinking out loud here, a couple of different potential drivers. Does this sound like good area to further investigate, or I should be focusing on something else?
Yeah, I think this is a good approach. Let's say for one, we know we have sufficient carrier supply. For two, there was no major UI or backend change, And for 3, let's say we have, like, you are correct here, and people have been spending more time on the road.
Got it. Okay. So it really sounds like, the traffic components and playing a big role here, and that has like negatively impacted in terms of driver delivery time, meaning 2 parts, like taking longer for the drivers to arrive at the restaurant to pick up the order, and also taking longer for them to actually deliver to the customer. So if that's kind of like where we wanted to focus and solve, so I think there are a couple of things that we can consider doing in terms of like addressing that problem. And then I'll kind of share both of the potential solutions, and then also share kind of like the pros and cons of each. And then we can evaluate which one makes more sense. And then we can talk about next steps and also like potential risks associated with it. I think the first one is like, if we're thinking about that, the cities start to reopen, there's more traffic. And I think we should consider here is the alternative delivery methods. I know for like, DoorDash or some other on-demand food delivery, there is like different options such as delivery by bikes, scooters, motorcycles, or even by walking. So I think that's something that we can consider, particularly for those like metro or downtown areas. The pros for that is, one, delivery time could be less impacted by traffic. I know like from our own experience in those like highly trafficked areas, sometimes it's faster just by walking or like riding bikes compared to like driving a vehicle. And then secondly is, I know some of these functionality has already been built. So if we just like recommend or increase the usage or promote these alternative delivery methods, it shouldn't require a ton of like engineering or products and development time, since this is already something existing. But we might need some like lightweight, in terms of built on the features. But I believe the kind of like the key functionality is there. And that's on the pro side, but I think we should also consider like the downside or the cons of these like alternative delivery methods. I think number one is there could be potentially like challenges in terms of like managing delivery quality. I know that's something very important to DoorDash. I think just like food could be easily spilled if you're like delivery via like motorcycles or bikes, scooters, or like walking, which could ended up like negatively impacting our customer experience if your order arrived spilled. So that's part one. And then the second piece in terms of like the cons is that we might need to evaluate like how much carrier supply we have who are willing to do the alternative delivery methods. We might need to recruit more of those carriers and have to like onboard them. So even if we, identify there's something that works, we also need to make sure that we can support that. So that's kind of like the second part of this potential solution, which is like the alternative delivery methods. The second potential solution I have in mind is promoting more of the pickup. So I know after the customer, when the customer is placing an order, they can choose they want this to be delivered, or they can pick up the order themselves. And of course, this is like a relatively easy one in terms that customer can get their orders faster, which address our problem. However, I think there are more serious like consequences or implications with this. And then just to share a couple of thoughts, number one could be, if there are fewer delivery orders, means, carriers on the platforms, they're making fewer dollars. That could potentially lead to like carrier churn issues if their, carriers do not have like enough orders being matched to. And then the second part is that the customer actually do not get that kind of like your food is at your doorstep kind of experience. That could also be another thing to consider. And I think just kind of like between these two, like I would actually recommend the first one is like the alternative delivery methods. Just given the advantage that I mentioned is that, definitely help us address reduce the overall customer wait time. Of course, we'll talk about like we should validate that to make sure it actually works. And then Two is that I think this one probably requires less, development time or building time. So sounds like a relatively lower cost solution to implement. But I think that's kind of high level, the two, and then also the one that I recommend on the alternative delivery methods. Does this kind of the one, sounds good to you before I kind of go into the next steps, and also like potential risks that we should consider?
Yeah, that makes sense. I love to get a sense of the next steps. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I think for us, it's like basically the hypothesis is that if we do increase the usage of the alternative delivery methods, we'll be able to address this problem. So I think I wanted to conduct experiments based on selected metro markets, and where we can compare within a certain distance, like orders being delivered via like bikes or walking versus orders being delivered via vehicle. And then we can compare if, the alternative delivery methods actually meaningfully reduce the delivery time, while they have also to meet the goal of the delivery quality. So a couple like key metrics here I wanted to monitor for our experiment is, of course, number one, the delivery time, which we identify is the root cause of the overall customer wait time. And then, of course, the second piece is that we do not want to sacrifice the CSAT score. We do want, people to get their order earlier, but also making sure the quality of the order is there. So, just like super high level, those like would be the two I think that we should focus on. So this will kind of help us to evaluate, if, this potential solution makes sense and how meaningful it is that is reducing our overall wait time. And then, of course, like following that, if that is a possible or validated way to help us address the problem, I think we definitely wanted to evaluate, do we have sufficient supply of carriers who can do the delivery on these methods? Because the potential risk is that if without knowing that, if we have insufficient supply, then we do actually need to build up the supply first, meaning that we have to recruit those carriers and also, onboarding them so that they can actually do those deliveries. So that's kind of like how I think about, my recommended solution and also the next steps.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking me through this question. Great. I think I was taking some notes during the call, and I think you did a really great job sort of walking through the funnel, right? And like breaking it down at each point where things could go wrong and checking in with the interviewer to kind of see where they were at. So that was really great. And then I think another really great thing you did was when you got down to the solution aspects, you explicitly called out the pros and cons and how each would weigh against each other, right? Like some cons might be bigger than others. One little thing about polish maybe, when we got down to the metrics, you hit all the right spots, but it might be good to sort of bucket them into broad categories like delivery time and CSAT score, or maybe on like the consumer and customer side, and maybe some of the stuff about supply is maybe more of like an ops metric. But all in all, I think you did a really great job. Anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, thank you so much for the feedback. I think just like super quick self-reflection here. And one thing I kind of like forgot and is, just to make this more holistic or exhaustive evaluation, I could have also asked you in terms of, if there is any like internal issues like on the data or like platform issues, if it's a problem happening on a particular like iOS or like Android systems. I think I kind of like walk in like just treated that as a business problem, like without, kind of like validating with you if there's something going on, like a system glitch or like new release or a bug. I think that's number one, just like to be like more holistic and like exhaustive. That should also be like check the box. And then the other piece I'm thinking about is like, I think initially you mentioned this about like a 15% like increase compared to May. I think the other thing just like helpful to check with the interviewer would be like, how does that, compare to maybe like pre-COVID time? So maybe this was like a, within normal range pre-COVID time. This is just kind of like normal, like COVID, and then went back to normal. So that would also kind of help to evaluate, this is something like complete out of range. We had never seen it before, or this is like kind of like within a normal range compared to pre-COVID, I think that bigger context will also help to kind of like thinking through the problem. So that's just like kind of, quick 2 things I like, super quick self-reflection. But yeah, thank you so much for your feedback as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show with us. And for those of you watching, good luck on your upcoming interview.